Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today is Dr. Thomas Schwartz from Vanderbilt University. Dr. Schwartz, I want to go back to something we talked about briefly before. At this point, President Trump is facing re-election next year. How is the fact that he's facing re-election and some of the difficulties he's had with the investigations, potential talk about impeachment, and other things that are going on, his ratings in job performance, which have never been all that great, how is that impacting the way our allies and our adversaries see him? Are they discounting things or already assuming certain things and how they deal with the United States? I do think, and this has been stated by some analysts, that a number of our allies and adversaries, particularly Iran and maybe China, maybe Russia, although maybe less so in the case of Russia, are thinking that Trump may lose in 2020 and that they only have to make it through another 16 months or so of this before there'll be a different type of administration. So there may be some calculations that politically Trump is not going, given the polls and the rest, is not going to prevail, and so that they don't have to, some of his disruptive behavior in foreign policy is something they can expect to go away. I read a lot this week about the sort of the disagreement in the foreign policy community that what President Trump is doing, while it's unconventional, right, seems to be working better than people thought. Other people say one of the reasons we're seeing all the turmoil in the world is that President Trump doesn't have a strategy. Where do you come down? Well, I have a hard time seeing a larger overall strategy. What I do see is a willingness to simply defy conventional wisdom. A lot of what he has done, at least in the past, was seen as simply you don't do. Recognizing the embassy in Israel, recognizing the Golan Heights, those sorts of steps, pulling out of an agreement that had been made, like the Iranian nuclear agreement or the Paris climate change agreement. In a way, I do see someone who's willing to be disruptive on the idea that these things, being difficult to read, throws other countries off guard. And if he gets some results from this, it could be actually very valuable for him. The new Middle East plan appears to be coming out under the auspices of the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. He doesn't have any experience in foreign policy. Is that an asset or a detriment? And Kushner himself has some involvements in the Middle East through the Saudis. Is that going to make the U.S. even less of be seen as an honest broker in the matter? Oh, yeah, I think those days have gone. The thing that's interesting about the Middle East, of course, is that the president's key ally there, Netanyahu, won re-election and won it and has a secure base there. So in a way, the president's not really as vulnerable there unless there were to be a war or another intifada uprising by the Palestinians or something that really caught people's attention. He's right, actually. I don't think there he's as politically vulnerable. Let's talk to North Korea. Is there going to be a third summit, and what is there to talk about? The North Koreans have gone back to doing missiles, not nuclear missiles at this point, to test those, but it appears that even though these two summits have been held, not much has gotten accomplished. Not much in the direct way. I would say, in defense of what the administration has done, it has lowered the level of perceived risk there. It has also followed pretty much in the footsteps of its South Korean ally. I do think to some extent whether there's a summit or not might very much depend on what South Koreans want and whether they can convince the president that there is being made progress there. North Korea seems to be suffering from a terrible drought right now. The conditions are actually very bad. There is some reason to believe they might be more willing to talk again, and I think this is an area, like in the case of the Middle East with Israel, where we're being, in a way, led by our allies rather than leading them. Let's turn to Venezuela. Is what the president trying to do down there in terms of regime change, is this part of the long history dating back to the Monroe Doctrine of the 1820s, that anything in North and South America is the U.S.'s bailiwick and that's their sphere of influence? Or is there something else going on here for why the administration seems to be willing to at least push and talk about military intervention? Well, I do think on Venezuela the president has far greater international support. The Europeans largely also feel that Juan Guaido is the legitimate president. There is the general sense that Maduro stole the election and should leave. On the other hand, the problem is that Maduro has got such support from the army that it may be that only only through a threat of foreign intervention can Guaido convince Maduro to leave, and that threat of foreign intervention would reactivate all the concerns about the Monroe Doctrine and U.S. sphere of influence, and would be very detrimental, I think, to our position.
We're talking about American intervention, we talk about foreign intervention, international intervention.
There's not going to be foreign intervention internationally. It would be the United States would have to take the lead, and that is where it gets really very, very touchy.
In terms of our current other allies, the president's been kind of quiet about NATO later, and as European, he's not been beating up on them as much lately, but he's going to Europe pretty soon for the anniversary of D-Day, and I think there's going to be some other meetings. He's going to see these European leaders. Or should we expect some more concerns about how much they do or don't pay for their defense and other issues like tariffs that have divided this country and his allies?
There may be, although I also have the sense he might want to crow about what successes he's had. There has been an increase in the amount of money that the allies are spending on defense, so that he can point to some tangible achievements from his pressure, and he may prefer to do that for the political impact rather and the stage that D-Day affords him for domestic purposes than really attack NATO again.
But he likes to keep things stirred up. I mean, if there's one consistency in his policy, whether it's domestic policy or foreign policy, is that he's not afraid to be the bull in the china shop. In fact, it seems he kind of relishes that.
He does, and that certainly could be the case. I guess the thing that I think makes me wonder about this one is because it is a stage set with D-Day, and the opportunity, as Ronald Reagan so effectively exploited it, say back in 1984, to really highlight American leadership, that he may prefer to do that rather than to have the press come out of this with a negative view.
Dr. Schwartz, thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure we'll be back to talk about some of these issues again in the future.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Inside Politics. I'll be back here again for a future show. If you can't enough politics in the meantime, go to the News Channel 5 website. You'll find my Capitol View commentary there. There's new commentary posted every Friday afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you back here next time. Goodbye.